My name is Mia Bennett. I am 24 years old. I live in a small apartment above my father's bakery. The bakery is called Bennett's Bread. My father opened it when I was 5 years old. I grew up with the smell of warm bread every morning. But now the bakery was in trouble. Big trouble. My father had a heart attack 2 years ago. After that, he could not work as much. I took over most of the baking. But the bills did not stop coming. Rent went up, flour prices went up, and 3 months ago my father took a loan from the bank to fix the old oven. He did not tell me until it was too late. Now the bank wanted the money back, all of it, $10,000, in 2 weeks. I sat at the small kitchen table one night, looking at the letter from the bank. My hands were shaking. "We are going to lose it, Dad," I said. "We are going to lose everything." My father, Walter Bennett, was sitting across from me. His hair was more gray than brown now. His eyes looked tired. "I am sorry, Mia," he said quietly. "I should have told you sooner." "It's okay," I said, even though it was not okay. "We will find a way." But I did not know how. I had already asked every bank for a loan. No one would give money to a small bakery with bad credit. I had already sold my mother's old jewelry. That gave me only $2,000. I still needed $8,000 more. I could not sleep that night. I sat by my window and looked at the city lights. Somewhere out there, rich people were living easy lives. They did not worry about ovens or rent or loans. I felt angry, but mostly I felt scared. The next morning, I went to work as always. I opened the bakery at 6 in the morning. I made bread, cookies, and cakes. I smiled at customers even though my heart was heavy. At noon, my best friend Sarah came in. She worked at a coffee shop nearby, and she always visited during her lunch break. "You look terrible," she said, sitting down at the counter. "Thank you," I said. "I feel terrible." I told her about the bank letter. Sarah listened carefully, her coffee getting cold in her hands. "Mia," she said slowly, "I saw something strange online yesterday. A job posting. It sounded crazy, but it might be exactly what you need." "What kind of job?" Sarah showed me her phone. On the screen was a short message posted on a private job board. "Wanted. A woman aged 20 to 30, single, for a temporary personal arrangement. Duration, 24 hours. Payment, $50,000. Discretion required. No romantic obligations. Serious inquiries only." I read it 3 times. "This has to be fake," I said. "Or dangerous, or both." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But look at the company name at the bottom. Cross Enterprises. That's a real company, Mia. A very big one. Their offices are downtown, in that huge glass building." I knew the building she meant. Everyone in the city knew it. The Cross Tower stood taller than almost every other building around it, its windows shining gold in the sunset. $50,000, I whispered. That was 5 times what I needed. It could save the bakery and give us extra money for the future. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do," Sarah said. "But maybe you should at least ask. Find out what it really is." That night, I could not stop thinking about the message. $50,000. 24 hours. What could it mean? A modeling job? A strange party? Something worse? I told myself I would not do it. It was too risky. But the next morning, when I saw the bank letter again on the kitchen table, something in me changed. I sent an email to the address listed on the job posting. I wrote, "Hello, I am interested in learning more about the position you posted. Could you tell me more details? Thank you, Mia Bennett." I did not expect a fast answer. But 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was a number I did not know. "Hello," I said. "Miss Bennett?" A woman's voice, calm and professional. "My name is Diane. I work for Mr. Ethan Cross. I received your email. Would you be available to meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock? At the Cross Tower, 40th floor." My heart began to beat fast. "Yes," I said. "I can be there." "Good. Please bring identification. And Miss Bennett, this conversation is confidential. Please do not discuss it with anyone until after our meeting." "I understand," I said, even though I did not understand anything at all. I hung up the phone and sat down slowly. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was not only fear. it was something else too. Hope, maybe, or curiosity, or both. I looked out the window at the cross tower in the distance. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building and meet a man I had never seen before. A man who was offering $50,000 for something he called a temporary personal arrangement. I did not know it yet, but that meeting would change my whole life. The next day, I put on my best dress. It was a simple blue dress I bought 2 years ago for my cousin's wedding. I did not own anything fancy. My life was flour, sugar, and early mornings, not fashion. I took the bus downtown. The cross tower grew bigger and bigger as I got closer. When I finally stood in front of it, I had to bend my neck back just to see the top. Inside, the lobby was all marble and glass. My shoes made loud clicking sounds on the shiny floor. I felt very small and very out of place. "Can I help you?" a man at the front desk asked, looking at my simple dress with a small, polite frown. "I have a meeting with Diane," I said, "on the 40th floor." He checked his computer, then nodded. "Elevator on your left, Miss Bennett. You are expected." The elevator ride felt very long, my stomach twisted with nerves. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, a woman was already waiting for me. She was tall, with short gray hair and sharp eyes. This was Diane. "Miss Bennett," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming. Please, follow me." She led me down a long hallway with large windows. Through the glass, I could see the whole city below, tiny cars moving like ants on the streets. Finally, we stopped at a large wooden door. "Mr. Cross will explain everything," Diane said. "Please, go in." I took a deep breath and opened the door. The office was huge, with one whole wall made of glass. A man stood by the window, looking out at the city. When he turned around, I forgot how to breathe for a second. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp gray eyes. He wore a black suit that looked more expensive than anything I had ever seen. His face was serious, almost cold, but there was something tired in his eyes too, something that did not match the rest of his powerful appearance. "Miss Bennett," he said. His voice was deep and calm. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." I sat in a chair across from his large desk. He sat down too, studying me carefully, like he was reading a book. "I imagine you have questions," he said. "Many questions," I admitted. He nodded. "My name is Ethan Cross. I am the CEO of Cross Enterprises. I need to explain something personal, so please keep this private." "Of course." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My grandfather, Robert Cross, built this company from nothing. He is 88 years old now and very sick. The doctors say he may only have a few months left." His voice did not shake, but I saw pain flash across his eyes for just a moment. "My grandfather has one wish before he dies," Ethan continued. "He wants to see me married. It has always mattered to him. He believes a man is not complete without a family. He has asked me about it for years, and I have always said no. I am too busy with the company. I have no time, and honestly no interest in marriage." "So why now?" I asked. "Because 2 days ago, my grandfather's doctor called me. He said my grandfather's heart is getting weaker very quickly. He may not survive the month. My grandfather asked me one more time, maybe his last time, if I had found someone. I could not say no again. Not this time." I felt something soften in my chest, even though I barely knew this man. "So you told him yes?" "I told him I was engaged," Ethan said, "and that we would be married very soon. He was so happy, Miss Bennett, happier than I have seen him in years. He wants to attend the wedding himself, this weekend, at his house outside the city." "But you don't actually have anyone to marry," I said slowly, understanding now. "No," Ethan said. "I do not date. I do not have time for relationships. I made up a fiancé to give my grandfather peace before he dies. Now I need someone to play that role. For one day, a real wedding, with real papers, so my grandfather sees everything is truthful. Then, 24 hours later, we will file for an annulment quietly. No one outside my family will ever know the truth." I stared at him. "You want to actually marry me? Legally?" "Yes," Ethan said. It must be real on paper, for my grandfather to believe it. But it ends after 24 hours. No expectations beyond that. I will pay you $50,000 for your time and your discretion. The room was quiet for a moment. I could hear my own heartbeat. Why me? I asked. You don't know anything about me. Diane found several women who might fit the role, Ethan said. Women without complicated relationships, without family who would ask too many questions, women who need money quickly and quietly. Your bakery's financial trouble is public record, unfortunately, from the small business court filings. I am sorry to know that about you, but it also means you have a real reason to want this money and a real reason to keep this private. I felt embarrassed that he knew about my father's bakery, about our money problems, but I also felt something like relief. He was being honest, at least. What do I have to do exactly? I asked. You would come to my grandfather's estate this Saturday. We would marry in a small ceremony, just family. You would spend the day and one night there, playing the role of my loving fiancée turned wife. Sunday afternoon, my driver would take you home. Monday, our lawyers begin the annulment process quietly. You keep the money regardless of what happens after. And there's nothing else? No other expectations? I asked carefully, feeling my face grow warm. For the first time, something like a small smile touched his lips. No, Miss Bennett, this is a business arrangement, nothing more. We would have separate rooms. My grandfather's house is very large. I looked down at my hands. $50,000. It would save the bakery. It would fix the roof that leaked every winter. It would let my father rest without worry. But it also meant lying to a dying old man, lying to an entire family, pretending to love a stranger. Can I think about it? I asked. You have until tomorrow morning, Ethan said. I understand this is a big decision, but time is not something my grandfather has much of. I stood up, my legs feeling weak. I will call Diane tomorrow with my answer. Thank you for considering it, Ethan said, standing as well. He walked me to the door, and just before I left, he added quietly, For what it's worth, Miss Bennett, I am sorry to ask this of you. I know it is unusual, but my grandfather deserves peace at the end of his life, even if it comes from a lie. I nodded, unable to speak, and walked out of his office with my mind spinning. That night, I did not sleep much. I lay awake thinking about Ethan Cross's tired gray eyes, about his dying grandfather, about the $50,000 that could save everything my father had built. I thought about lying. I did not like lying. My mother always taught me to be honest, even when honesty was hard. But this felt different. This was a small lie to bring comfort to an old man in his last days, and it would be a lie that saved my family too. Around midnight, I went downstairs to the bakery. I could not sleep, so I decided to bake instead. Baking always helped me think clearly. I mixed flour, sugar, and butter, my hands moving through the familiar motions, while my mind worked through the decision. My father found me there at 1 a.m, sitting on a flour sack, eating a warm cookie. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting down beside me slowly. His heart doctor told him to move carefully now. Dad, I said, what would you say if I told you I found a way to get the money for the bank? He looked at me with surprise. How? I told him everything. The job posting, the meeting with Ethan Cross, the pretend marriage, the $50,000. My father was quiet for a long time after I finished. Mia, he finally said, this is a big decision. A legal marriage, even a short one, is not something small. I know. And you would be lying to a dying man. That does not sit right with me. It doesn't sit right with me either, I admitted. But Dad, we lose the bakery in 2 weeks if I don't do something. This isn't only about you and me anymore. Mom built this place with you. I don't want to lose it. My father's eyes grew wet. He looked down at his hands, rough and marked from years of kneading dough. Your mother would tell you to follow your heart, he said quietly. Whatever you decide, Mia, I will support you. But please, be careful. Rich men are not always what they seem. I will be careful, I promised. I hugged my father tightly, breathing in the familiar smell of flour and coffee that always surrounded him. Then I went back up to my apartment and called Diane, even though it was almost 2 a.m. I left a message. This is Mia Bennett. I have decided to accept Mr. Cross's offer. Please call me with the details. I hung up the phone and finally fell asleep, my heart pounding with fear and something that felt strangely like excitement. Diane called back early the next morning. Her voice was brisk and businesslike, as if arranging fake marriages was something she did every week. "Wonderful," she said. "I will send over the paperwork today. There is a legal contract you must sign, promising confidentiality. There is also the marriage license, which you and Mr. Cross will sign together on Saturday. A car will pick you up Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Please pack an overnight bag. We have arranged a dress for the ceremony, but you may bring your own things as well." "Okay," I said, my head spinning with all the information. "One more thing, Miss Bennett," Diane added. "Mr. Cross's grandfather, Mr. Robert Cross, does not know this is arranged. To him, this must look completely real. Please remember every detail we discuss so there are no mistakes." "I understand," I said, though my stomach twisted with nerves. The papers arrived by messenger 2 hours later. I sat at my kitchen table and read through the contract carefully. It was full of legal words I did not fully understand, but the important parts were clear. I would receive $50,000 for my participation. I would keep everything confidential, forever, even after the marriage ended. In exchange, Ethan Cross would file for a quiet annulment on Monday morning, and I would be free to return to my normal life. I signed my name at the bottom of the last page, Mia Elizabeth Bennett. My hand shook slightly as I wrote it. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur. I trained myself to remember small facts Diane sent me about the relationship, how Ethan and I supposedly met at a charity dinner 8 months ago, how he proposed at a small restaurant by the river, how I worked as a baker and he found that charming and different from the women he usually met. I also learned small facts about Ethan himself. He was 30 years old. He took over as CEO of Cross Enterprises 3 years ago, after his father passed away suddenly. His mother had died when he was young. His grandfather Robert had basically raised him after his father became busy running the company. Ethan had no siblings. He rarely dated and never seriously. Reading these small facts made him seem less like a stranger and more like a real person, a person with his own sadness hidden behind those sharp gray eyes. By Friday night, I had packed a small bag. I sat on my bed looking at it, my heart pounding with nerves. "Are you scared?" Sarah asked over the phone. I had finally told her the whole story, sworn to secrecy. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I mess something up? What if his grandfather realizes it's fake? What if—" "Mia," Sarah interrupted gently, "you're one of the strongest people I know. You have taken care of your dad, your bakery, everything, all by yourself for 2 years. You can handle one weekend of pretending to be married to a handsome rich man." I laughed, despite my nerves. "I didn't say he was handsome." "You didn't have to," Sarah said. "I could hear it in your voice when you described him." I hung up the phone, still smiling a little, and turned off my light. Tomorrow, I would become Mrs. Ethan Cross, at least for 24 hours. I had no idea, lying there in the dark, just how much those 24 hours would change everything. A black car arrived exactly at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. The driver, an older man named Frank, greeted me with a warm smile and helped me put my bag in the trunk. "Nervous?" he asked kindly, as we drove out of the city. "Very," I admitted. "Don't worry," Frank said. "The Cross family estate is beautiful. And Mr. Robert, the grandfather, he's a good man. Kind heart. You'll like him." His words made me feel a little better, but also a little worse. If Robert Cross was truly kind, then lying to him felt even more wrong. The drive took almost 2 hours. Slowly, the city buildings disappeared, replaced by green hills and old trees. Finally, we turned onto a long driveway lined with tall oak trees. At the end of the driveway stood a huge stone house, bigger than any house I had ever seen in real life. It looked like something from an old movie, with tall windows and ivy growing up one wall. Ethan was waiting outside when the car stopped. He wore a simple gray sweater instead of his business suit, and somehow he looked even more handsome, more real, standing there in the morning sunlight. "Miss Bennett," he said, opening my car door himself. "Thank you for coming. Please, call me Mia, I said. If we're supposed to be engaged, Miss Bennet might seem strange to your family. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe respect. Of course, Mia. He led me inside the house. The entrance hall alone was bigger than my entire apartment, with a curved staircase and a huge crystal light hanging from the ceiling. But despite its size, the house did not feel cold. There were family photos on the walls, old and new, and the smell of something baking drifted from the kitchen. My grandfather is resting right now, Ethan said quietly. He tires easily these days. We will see him this afternoon before the ceremony. Let me show you to your room. We walked up the curved staircase and down a long hallway. He stopped at a door near the end. This will be your room for tonight, he said. Mine is across the hall. The bathroom is connected to your room, private for you. Thank you, I said, stepping inside. The room was beautiful, with a large bed covered in soft white blankets and tall windows looking out over a garden. There's a dress in the closet for the ceremony, Ethan said. My grandmother's wedding dress, actually. My grandfather kept it all these years. I hope that is all right. Something about that detail made my chest tighten. That's very special, I said softly. Are you sure he wants a stranger wearing it? He doesn't know you're a stranger, Ethan reminded me gently. To him, you are the woman I love. I nodded, though the words made me feel strange, a small ache in my chest I did not understand. Before we go downstairs, Ethan said, we should go over our story one more time. Diane sent you the details? Yes, we met at a charity dinner 8 months ago. You proposed at a restaurant by the river 3 weeks ago. Good. My grandfather will ask questions. He loves details, loves stories. Answer naturally. Do not overthink it. Easy for you to say, I said. You're not the one who has to convince your grandfather you fell in love with a stranger. Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile. Actually, I am also convincing him of exactly that. We are in this together, Mia. For a moment, standing there in that beautiful room, something passed between us. A strange, quiet understanding. We were two strangers, about to lie to a dying man together, both of us doing it for reasons that mattered deeply to us. Okay, I said. Together. That afternoon, Ethan took me to meet his grandfather. Robert Cross was sitting in a large chair by a window in his bedroom, a blanket over his legs despite the warm day. He looked thin and pale, but his eyes were bright and full of life when he saw us enter. Ethan, my boy, he said, his voice weak but warm. And this must be Mia. Hello, Mr. Cross, I said, walking closer and taking his offered hand gently. Please, call me Grandpa Robert. Everyone does, eventually, he said with a small laugh that turned into a cough. Take it easy, grandfather, Ethan said, moving to help him, but Robert waved him away. I'm not made of glass, Ethan. Sit, both of you. Tell me everything. How did my grandson finally convince a smart young woman to marry him? He's been alone so long I worried he'd turn into an old bitter man before his time. I glanced at Ethan, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. Well, I said, taking a breath. We met at a charity dinner. I was there because my bakery donated bread for the event. Ethan came to get a piece of bread, actually, and we started talking by the food table. A baker, Robert said, delighted. Oh, I like that very much. This family has had enough business talk to last several lifetimes. Tell me, what is your favorite thing to bake? Cinnamon rolls, I said honestly, my nervousness easing slightly, as I spoke about something true. My mother taught me the recipe before she passed away. It's the first thing I learned to bake, and still my favorite. Robert's eyes softened. I lost my wife too, many years ago. It changes you, doesn't it? Losing someone that important. It does, I agreed softly, thinking of my own mother, gone 5 years now. We talked for almost an hour. Robert asked about my family, about the bakery, about how Ethan proposed. Somehow, answering his questions did not feel as hard as I expected. Maybe because so much of what I said was actually true, just wrapped around a false relationship with Ethan. As we finally stood to leave, letting Robert rest before the ceremony, he took my hand once more. Thank you, he said quietly, his eyes suddenly serious. Thank you for making my grandson happy. I was afraid he would spend his whole life alone, hiding behind that company, never letting anyone close. You have no idea what this means to me. I felt my throat tighten with guilt. I'm glad I could be here, I said, which was, at least, completely true. Walking back down the hallway, Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, he finally said. You were wonderful with him. He's a sweet man, I said. It made it harder, not easier, to lie to him. Ethan stopped walking and looked at me carefully. I know, he said quietly. Believe me, I know. For the first time since I met him, I saw something real behind his careful, controlled expression. Guilt, sadness, and something else I could not quite name. We stood there in the hallway, two strangers bound together by a lie, and for a moment, it did not feel like a lie at all. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the house, just as the sun began to lower in the sky, painting everything gold and pink. Only a small group of people attended. Robert Cross, sitting in a comfortable chair someone had brought outside for him, a few older family friends, Diane standing quietly near the back, and a kind older man named Pastor Williams, who had apparently known the Cross family for 30 years. I stood in a small room off the garden, looking at myself in the mirror. The wedding dress fit almost perfectly, as if it had been made for me. It was simple and elegant, cream-colored silk with small pearl buttons down the back. Looking at my reflection, I almost did not recognize myself. A soft knock came at the door. It was Diane. It's time, she said, then paused, looking at me carefully. You look beautiful, Miss Bennett. Are you ready? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Is that a normal thing to feel before a fake wedding? Diane's serious face softened slightly. I imagine it is. For what it's worth, Mr. Cross seems more nervous than I have ever seen him, and I have worked for him for 8 years. That surprised me. Ethan had seemed so calm, so controlled since the moment I met him. I walked out into the garden, my heart pounding with every step. The small group of guests turned to watch me walk down the short path between the flowers, and there, standing beside Pastor Williams, was Ethan. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, his dark hair slightly messy from the evening breeze. When he saw me, something changed in his expression, something I could not fully read. His eyes moved over my face like he was truly seeing me for the first time. I reached him and took his offered hand. It was warm, and I noticed it was shaking slightly, just barely. You look beautiful, he whispered, so quietly only I could hear. So do you, I whispered back, then immediately felt embarrassed. I mean handsome. You look handsome. The corner of his mouth twitched into an almost smile. Pastor Williams began speaking, his voice warm and gentle, but I barely heard the words. I was too aware of Ethan's hand holding mine, too aware of Robert Cross watching us from his chair, with tears of happiness in his eyes, too aware of the strange mix of guilt and something else, something warmer, growing in my chest. Do you, Ethan Cross, take Mia Bennett to be your wife? Pastor Williams asked. Ethan looked directly into my eyes. I do, he said, his voice steady and clear. Do you, Mia Bennett, take Ethan Cross to be your husband? I looked back at him, at those gray eyes that seemed less cold now, less distant, and something in my chest twisted strangely. I do, I said softly. Then, by the power given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride. My heart stopped for a moment. We had not discussed this part. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes asking a silent question. I gave a tiny nod, and his lips touched mine, soft and brief, and warmer than I expected. It lasted only a second, but something about it felt more real than anything I had prepared myself for. The small group of guests clapped and cheered. Robert Cross was crying openly now, happy tears rolling down his thin cheeks. Finally, he said, his weak voice full of joy. Finally, my boy is not alone anymore. That evening, we had a small dinner in the grand dining room. Robert sat at the head of the table, telling old stories about the company, about Ethan's father, about the early days when Cross Enterprises was just a small idea in a garage. I laughed at his jokes, genuinely, and found myself enjoying his company more than I expected. Ethan sat beside me the whole evening, occasionally placing his hand over mine when he saw his grandfather watching, playing the loving new husband perfectly. But sometimes, when Robert was not looking, I caught Ethan watching me with an expression that seemed less like acting and more like genuine curiosity. "You're good at this," he said quietly, during a quiet moment while Robert spoke to an old family friend. "At pretending?" I asked. "At making people feel comfortable," Ethan said. "My grandfather has not laughed this much in months. The doctors said stress was bad for his heart. Tonight he seems peaceful." "He's easy to make laugh," I said. "He tells good stories." "He does," Ethan agreed, looking down the table at his grandfather, with an expression of deep love, mixed with obvious pain, knowing their time together was limited. "I'm glad you get to see him like this. Happy." "Me too," I said honestly. After dinner, Robert grew tired, and a nurse helped him back to his room to rest. Before leaving, he took both my hands and Ethan's hands together in his own thin, weak grip. "I am so happy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Thank you both for today. This is the best day I have had in a very long time." I felt tears sting my own eyes, guilt and warmth mixing together painfully in my chest. "Good night, Grandpa Robert," I said softly. "Good night, my dear granddaughter," he replied, and those words hit me harder than I expected. After he left, Ethan and I stood alone in the quiet dining room, the candles slowly burning lower. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "For today, for all of it, you gave him something I could not have given him alone." "He's a wonderful man," I said. "I'm glad I could help, even though—" I trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Even though it's built on a lie," Ethan finished for me. "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment, looking at me with an expression I could not fully read. "Would you like to take a walk?" he asked suddenly. "The garden is beautiful at night, and I think I would like to know more about you. The real you, not just the story we practiced." I looked at him, surprised by the request, surprised by the warmth suddenly filling my chest at the idea. "I would like that," I said. We walked out into the moonlit garden together, two strangers married by lies, about to spend the rest of the night discovering something that felt strangely, dangerously real. The garden at night was even more beautiful than during the day. Small lights hung between the trees, and the flowers released a sweet smell into the cool evening air. We walked slowly along a stone path, not speaking at first, just enjoying the quiet. "So," Ethan finally said, "tell me something true, something that was not in Diane's notes." I laughed softly. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything." He glanced at me. "I realized today that I know facts about your life, but I don't actually know you." I thought for a moment. "Okay, something true. I wanted to be a chef when I was younger. Not just a baker, a real chef in a fancy restaurant. I even got accepted into a culinary school in France when I was 19. What happened? My mother got sick that year. Cancer. I stayed home to help take care of her and keep the bakery running. She died a year later, and by then, my father needed me even more, so I never went." Ethan stopped walking, looking at me with something like understanding in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "That must have been very hard." "It was," I admitted. "But I don't regret staying. My mother needed me. My father still needs me. The bakery is important to our family, even if it's not the fancy French restaurant I once dreamed about." "Do you ever think about going back to that dream?" Ethan asked. "Once things are more stable?" No one had ever asked me that question before, not even Sarah. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday. Right now, I'm just trying to keep everything from falling apart." We started walking again, the path curving toward a small stone bench near a fountain. We sat down together, close but not touching. "Your turn," I said. "Tell me something true, something Diane didn't put in her notes about you." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, looking at the water flowing gently in the fountain. "I did not want to become CEO," he finally said. "When my father died, everyone assumed I would take over immediately. I was 27. I had actually been planning to leave the company, to start something small on my own, something different. But then my father was gone, and my grandfather was already getting sick, and there was no one else to hold everything together. You gave up your dream too, I said softly. I suppose I did, Ethan said, seeming almost surprised by the realization. I don't think I ever thought about it that way before. What was your dream? The thing you wanted to start? He smiled slightly, a real smile this time, the first genuine one I had seen from him. I wanted to build affordable housing, good quality, but cheap enough for regular families. My father's company builds luxury buildings, expensive apartments for rich people. I always thought there should be a company that builds nice homes for everyone else too, the teachers, the nurses, the bakers. He glanced at me with a small, teasing smile. That's a good dream, I said, meaning it completely. Maybe someday, Ethan said, echoing my own words from moments earlier. We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the water in the fountain and the soft sounds of the night. I found myself very aware of how close he was sitting, of the warmth coming from his arm near mine. Can I ask you something else? Ethan said quietly. Of course. Why did you say yes to this? To the marriage, I mean. $50,000 is a lot of money, but this is also a strange, difficult thing to agree to. Lying to my family, marrying a complete stranger. What made you decide it was worth the risk? I thought about how to answer honestly. I was scared, I admitted. Scared of losing the bakery. Scared of disappointing my father. Scared of failing at the one thing my mother left behind for us. The money felt like the only way to fix everything. But also, I paused, trying to find the right words. Also, when I read about your grandfather wanting to see you happy before he passes, something about that touched me. I lost my mother. I know what it feels like to wish you had more time with someone you love, to wish you could give them one more moment of happiness. I wanted to help you give that to him, even through a lie. Ethan looked at me for a long moment, something warm and surprised in his gray eyes. That's a very kind reason, he said quietly. What about you? I asked. Why did you really agree to lie to him? You could have just told him the truth, that you don't have time for relationships. I could have, Ethan agreed. But every time I see him now, I think about how little time we have left together. He raised me, Mia. After my mother died, after my father became consumed by the company, my grandfather was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to be a decent person, despite growing up around so much money and power. I could not bring myself to disappoint him one more time, not when his time is running out. I felt tears forming in my eyes, listening to him speak so honestly about his grandfather. He's lucky to have you, I said softly. I'm the lucky one, Ethan replied. I just wish I had more time to prove it to him. We sat together in silence again, but this time it felt different, closer, like something invisible had shifted between us. Slowly, without really deciding to, I reached over and took his hand. He looked down at our joined hands, then up at my face, surprise and something warmer flickering in his eyes. Mia, he said softly, I need to be honest about something. What? This was supposed to be simple, 24 hours, then we go back to our separate lives. But sitting here with you right now, I don't think I want tonight to end. My heart pounded hard in my chest. Neither do I whispered. We looked at each other under the soft garden lights. Two people who had started the day as complete strangers, now feeling something neither of us had expected or planned for. Ethan leaned closer slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I did not want to. This kiss was different from the one at the ceremony. This one was slow, gentle, and real, filled with all the honest feelings that had grown between us throughout that single, strange, beautiful day. When we finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against mine. This complicates things, he said softly, a small laugh in his voice. Very much so, I agreed, smiling despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. What do we do now? He asked. I did not have an answer. All I knew was that the marriage that was supposed to end in 24 hours suddenly felt like something I was not ready to let go of. I woke up the next morning in the soft white bed, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered everything: the wedding, the garden, the kiss under the stars. I touched my lips gently, as if I could still feel the warmth of Ethan's kiss there. What had happened last night? What did it mean for today, the last day of our arranged marriage? A soft knock came at my door. "Mia, are you awake?" It was Ethan's voice. "Yes, come in," I said, sitting up and pulling the blanket around myself. Ethan opened the door slowly, already dressed in casual clothes, his hair still slightly messy from sleep. He looked younger somehow, softer, without his usual business suit and controlled expression. "Good morning," he said, a small, almost shy smile on his face. "My grandfather wants to have breakfast with us before you leave. Is that all right?" "Of course," I said, my heart sinking a little at the reminder that today was our last day together, at least according to the plan we had made. We had breakfast together in the sunny kitchen, Robert Cross sitting at the head of the table, looking better than he had the day before. Some color returned to his pale cheeks. "You two look happy this morning," Robert said, watching us with a knowing smile. "We are," Ethan said, glancing at me, and for a moment, it did not feel like acting at all. After breakfast, Robert asked to speak with me privately, while Ethan handled a phone call from the office. The old man took my hand gently as I sat beside his chair in the sunroom. "Mia," he said seriously, "I want to tell you something. I have watched my grandson for 30 years. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not once, in all these years, has he ever seemed so at peace." "He's a wonderful man," I said, my throat tightening with guilt, and something else I could not fully name. "He is," Robert agreed, "but he is also a very guarded man. He learned early to protect himself, to keep people at a distance, especially after losing his mother and then his father. Whatever you did to break through that wall, please, don't stop. He needs someone who truly sees him, not just his money or his company." I did not know what to say. The old man's words felt like a knife in my chest, sharp with guilt over the lie we were living. "I will try my best," I said finally, which felt like the only honest thing I could say in that moment. Robert squeezed my hand gently. "That's all I ask." Later that morning, Ethan found me in the garden, sitting by the same fountain from the night before. He sat down beside me quietly. "My grandfather cornered you, didn't he?" he asked with a small, knowing smile. "He told me how happy he is that you found someone," I said quietly. It made everything feel more complicated. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Mia, about last night." "You don't have to explain," I interrupted, though my heart was pounding with fear of what he might say next. "No, I want to," he said firmly. "Last night was not part of the plan, but it was also the most honest I have felt with anyone in years. I don't want to pretend it did not happen." "Neither do I," I admitted softly. "The car is coming this afternoon to take you home," Ethan said. "According to the original plan, that's when this ends. The annulment paperwork begins tomorrow." I felt my chest tighten painfully. "Is that still what you want?" I asked quietly. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the garden. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "I only know that the thought of never seeing you again after today feels wrong, but I also know this is complicated. My grandfather is dying. My company depends on my full attention. And you have your own life, your own bakery to save. I don't know how something real between us could even work." I understood his fear, because I felt it too. This was supposed to be simple. A fake marriage, $50,000, a quiet ending. Real feelings were not part of the plan, and they made everything so much more complicated and risky. "Maybe," I said slowly, "we don't have to decide everything right now. Maybe we can just see what happens, without pressure, without expectations." Ethan looked at me, something like relief and hope flickering across his careful expression. "I would like that," he said. We spent the rest of the morning walking through the estate grounds, talking about everything and nothing, the earlier tension slowly easing into something warmer and more comfortable. When the black car finally arrived that afternoon to take me home, saying goodbye felt much harder than I had expected it to feel just 2 days earlier. "I'll call you," Ethan said, standing beside the car, holding both my hands in his. "I hope you do," I said, meaning it completely. He leaned down and kissed me softly, gently, right there in front of the house, in front of the driver, in front of everything. It was different from our other kisses. This one felt like a promise rather than a performance. "Goodbye, Mrs. Cross," he said with a small smile, using my temporary married name. "Goodbye, Mr. Cross," I replied, smiling despite the ache in my chest. I got into the car and watched the huge stone house disappear behind me as we drove away, my heart full of confusion, hope, and something that felt dangerously close to love, even after knowing this man for only 2 days. I had no idea, sitting in that car, that our story was far from over. The real changes, the ones that would truly transform my life, were only just beginning. The money arrived in my bank account Monday morning, exactly as promised. $50,000. I stared at the number on my phone screen for a long time, unable to fully believe it was real. I immediately called the bank and paid off the loan, saving Bennett's bread from closing forever. My father cried when I told him, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said, wiping his eyes. "Whatever you did, thank you." I did not tell him everything, only that I had taken a temporary job that paid very well. It felt strange keeping secrets from my father, but some parts of the truth felt too complicated, too fragile to share yet. I kept waiting for Ethan to call. He had said he would. Standing there by the car, holding my hands, he had promised to call, but Monday passed with silence, then Tuesday, then Wednesday. I told myself he was busy. He was a CEO of a huge company after all, with countless responsibilities. Maybe something urgent had come up. Maybe his grandfather had gotten sicker. Maybe the annulment paperwork had complications. But by Thursday, 5 days of silence, doubt began creeping into my heart. Had I imagined the connection between us? Had it only been real for me, while for him it was simply good acting, a convincing performance to please his dying grandfather? "Maybe he's just scared," Sarah suggested when I finally told her about the silence, sitting in my kitchen after the bakery closed for the day. Rich, powerful men like that, they're not always good at handling real feelings. It probably terrifies him more than any business deal ever could. "Or maybe it really was just acting," I said quietly, staring at my cold cup of tea. Maybe I was foolish to believe a man like that could actually fall for someone like me in just 24 hours. "Don't do that," Sarah said firmly. "Don't shrink yourself down like that. You are smart, kind, and talented. If he can't see that, he's the fool, not you." I appreciated her support, but it did not stop the ache in my chest every time I checked my phone and found no messages. By the following Monday, exactly 1 week after our wedding, I received a legal envelope in the mail. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were annulment papers, already signed by Ethan Cross, waiting only for my signature to make everything official and final. There was no note, no explanation, just cold, official paperwork, ending our marriage as quickly and quietly as it had begun. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at his signature on the page. Ethan Cross, written in confident, sharp handwriting. The same hand that had held mine so gently under the garden stars just 1 week earlier. I picked up a pen and signed my own name beneath his. Mia Elizabeth Bennett. My hand shook slightly, but I forced myself to finish it, to make it official. I mailed the papers back the next morning, my heart heavy with a sadness I had no right to feel over a marriage that was never supposed to be real in the first place. 2 more weeks passed. I threw myself into work at the bakery, waking up earlier than usual, staying later than necessary, trying to fill the strange emptiness that had settled into my chest since returning from the Cross estate. The bakery was thriving now, free from the weight of the bank loan. We even had extra money to fix the old oven properly and repaint the front of the shop. My father seemed healthier too, less stressed, his color returning to normal now that our financial troubles had eased. I should have felt happy. In many ways, I was happy, but there was still this quiet, persistent ache whenever I thought about Ethan, about that single day and night that had felt so real, so meaningful, before disappearing into silence and legal paperwork. One evening, almost a month after the wedding, Sarah came into the bakery just as I was closing up. "You need to see this," she said, holding out her phone, her face full of concern. On the screen was a news article. The headline read, "Cross Enterprises CEO's grandfather, Robert Cross, passes away at 88. My heart stopped. I quickly read through the short article. Robert Cross had passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days earlier, surrounded by family. The funeral had already taken place, a small, private ceremony at the family estate. Tears filled my eyes immediately, thinking of the kind old man who had held my hands so gently, who had called me his granddaughter, even though our whole relationship had been built on a lie. "Oh no," I whispered. "Poor Ethan." I thought about calling him, about sending my condolences, but I did not know if that was appropriate anymore. We were no longer married, not even pretend married. I was simply a stranger now, someone from a brief, strange chapter in his life that had already ended. But my heart ached for him anyway, imagining him grieving alone in that huge stone house, without his grandfather's warm laughter to fill the empty rooms. I did not call. I told myself it was not my place anymore, but I thought about him constantly over the following days, wondering how he was handling the loss, wondering if he thought about me at all during this difficult time, or if our brief marriage had already faded into nothing more than a strange, distant memory for him. I had no way of knowing that, at that very moment, Ethan Cross was sitting alone in his grandfather's empty study, holding a small photograph from our wedding day, and thinking about me more than he had ever expected to think about anyone. 3 more weeks passed. Summer turned slowly toward autumn, and the bakery stayed busy with the change of season, customers coming in for warm pastries as the mornings grew cooler. I had almost convinced myself that Ethan Cross was simply a strange, beautiful memory now, a chapter of my life that had closed completely. I focused on work, on my father's improving health, on rebuilding the small, normal life I had before that strange job posting changed everything. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, Diane walked into the bakery. I almost dropped the tray of bread I was carrying when I saw her standing by the door, shaking rain off her umbrella, looking as sharp and professional as ever. "Miss Bennett," she said, walking toward the counter. "Do you have a moment?" "Diane," I said, my heart suddenly racing. "Is everything okay? Is Ethan all right?" "He is managing," Diane said carefully. "Losing his grandfather has been very hard on him, harder than he lets most people see." "I'm so sorry," I said honestly. "Robert was a wonderful man." "He was," Diane agreed, her usually stern expression softening slightly. "He asked about you often, in his final weeks. He truly believed, until the end, that you and Ethan were deeply in love." Guilt washed over me again, even weeks later. "I'm sorry we lied to him." "Don't be," Diane said, surprising me. In his last month, Robert Cross was happier than I had seen him in years. Whatever discomfort the lie caused you, it gave a dying man real peace and joy in his final days. That matters more than you might realize. I nodded, unable to fully speak past the emotion in my throat. "I actually came here for a different reason," Diane continued, reaching into her bag. "Robert left something for you in his will." My eyes widened with shock. "Me? But he barely knew me. We only met for 1 weekend." "He knew enough," Diane said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written across it in shaky, elegant handwriting. "He asked that this be delivered to you personally after the funeral arrangements were settled." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. "Thank you, Diane," I said quietly. Diane nodded, then paused before turning to leave. "For what it's worth, Miss Bennett, Ethan has not been the same since your wedding. I have worked for that man for 8 years. I have never seen him distracted during business meetings, never seen him stare out his office window for so long, thinking about something or someone other than work. Whatever happened between you two that weekend, it changed him." She left without waiting for my response, the small bell above the door ringing softly behind her. I sat down at one of the small tables in the empty bakery, my hands still shaking as I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the handwriting shaky but determined, clearly written by someone weak but still full of purpose. Dear Mia, if you are reading this, I have already passed on to be with my wife again, which does not sadden me. I have lived a long, full life, and I am ready. I want to tell you something important before I go. I know, my dear, that your marriage to my grandson was not entirely what it seemed. An old man notices more than young people give him credit for. I saw the way you two looked at each other during those first hours, careful and distant, like strangers performing a role. But I also saw something change over that single day, something that grew more real with each passing hour. I do not know what will happen between you and Ethan after I am gone. That is not my business to control, only to hope for. But I want you to know something. Watching my grandson with you, even for that one short day, I saw him become the man I always hoped he would grow into. Warm, present, truly alive, rather than simply successful. Ethan has spent so many years protecting himself from loss, from pain, building walls around his heart after losing his mother, then his father. I worried in my final years that he would spend his whole life alone behind those walls, safe but never truly happy. You broke through something in him, my dear, even if it was only meant to be temporary. Whatever happens next, thank you for that gift. I have left you something in my will as well, a small piece of land near the eastern edge of our estate, along with enough funds to build whatever you dream of building there. Perhaps a bakery of your own, a real one, entirely yours, or perhaps something else entirely. The choice is yours completely, with no strings attached. Be well, Mia. And please, if you feel anything real for my grandson, do not let fear or misunderstanding keep you apart. Life is far too short for that kind of foolishness. I learned that lesson too late in my own life. Do not make the same mistake. With gratitude and affection, Robert Cross. I finished reading the letter with tears streaming freely down my face. My father found me there minutes later, still sitting at the small table, the letter held gently in my trembling hands. Mia, what's wrong? He asked, concern filling his voice. I could not speak at first, so I simply handed him the letter, watching his expression shift from confusion to understanding to gentle emotion as he read Robert's final words. He left me land, I finally managed to say, and money to build something of my own. That's incredibly generous, my father said softly, then looked at me carefully. But that's not why you're crying, is it? I shook my head. I think I made a mistake, Dad. I let fear keep me from calling Ethan after the wedding. I convinced myself it was all just acting on his part, that whatever I felt was only real for me. But what if I was wrong? My father smiled gently, placing his hand on my shoulder. Then maybe it's time to find out for certain, he said. Life is too short for maybes, Mia. Your mother taught me that lesson, and I nearly learned it too late myself. I looked down at the letter again, at Robert's final, generous words urging me not to let fear keep me from something real. That evening, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would go find Ethan Cross myself, and finally discover the truth about what happened between us during those 24 unforgettable hours. The next morning, I put on the same blue dress I had worn to my very first meeting with Ethan Cross, weeks earlier. It felt fitting somehow, like closing a circle that had started in that same lobby, under that same tall glass tower. I took the bus downtown, my heart pounding harder with every passing block. I had not called ahead. I had not told Diane I was coming. I simply wanted to walk in and see him, without any planning or performance this time. No contracts, no arrangements, just the truth. The same man sat at the front desk of the Cross Tower lobby, though this time he recognized me immediately. Mrs. Cross, he said, standing quickly. Miss Bennett, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure. It's all right, I said, offering a small, nervous smile. Is Mr. Cross available? I don't have an appointment, but it's important. The man hesitated, then picked up his phone, speaking quietly for a moment, before looking back at me. Diane says to go right up, 40th floor. My hands were shaking as I rode the elevator up, the numbers climbing slowly. When the doors finally opened, Diane was waiting, a small, knowing smile on her usually serious face. "He's in his office," she said simply. "Go ahead." I walked down the familiar hallway, past the tall windows overlooking the city, until I reached the large wooden door. I took a deep breath, then pushed it open without knocking. Ethan was standing by the window, exactly like the first time I had seen him, looking out over the city. But he looked different now, thinner somehow, tired in a way that went beyond simple lack of sleep. When he turned and saw me standing there, his whole expression shifted, surprise, and something deeper flooding his gray eyes. "Mia," he said softly, as if he could not quite believe I was really there. "Hello, Ethan," I said, suddenly unsure what to say next, now that I was actually standing in front of him. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. "I heard my grandfather left you something in his will," he said carefully. "Diane mentioned it. Is that why you're here? To discuss the property?" His words felt distant, careful, like he was protecting himself from something. It hurt more than I expected. "No," I said honestly. "I mean, yes, I received his letter, but that's not why I'm here." "Then why?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I'm here because you promised to call, and you didn't, because you sent annulment papers without even a note, because I have spent the last month wondering if what happened between us that weekend was real for you, or if it was only ever real for me." Ethan's expression crumbled slightly, guilt and pain flashing across his careful features. "Mia, it's complicated." "Then explain it to me," I said, my voice steadier now, fueled by weeks of confusion and hurt finally finding release. Because from where I stood, everything felt real. The garden, the things you told me about your dreams, the kiss under the stars, and then nothing. Silence. Cold legal paperwork. I don't understand what I did wrong. "You didn't do anything wrong," Ethan said quickly, moving closer now, his hands reaching for mine before stopping himself uncertainly. "Mia, the week after our wedding, my grandfather's health suddenly got much worse. The doctors said his heart was failing rapidly. I spent every single day at the hospital, watching him slip away a little more each time I visited. I was not avoiding you because I did not care. I was drowning in grief and fear, and I did not know how to bring you into that pain when everything between us started as a lie in the first place." His voice broke slightly on the last words, and I saw, for the first time, real tears forming in his tired gray eyes. "Why didn't you just tell me that?" I asked softly, my anger melting into something gentler as I saw the depth of his pain. "Because I was scared," Ethan admitted, his voice raw with honesty now. "Scared that if I let you in during the worst weeks of my life, and things did not work out between us, I would lose you and my grandfather at the same time. I convinced myself it was safer to end things cleanly, quickly, before I got hurt even more than I already was. So you pushed me away to protect yourself," I said quietly, understanding now. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "It was cowardly, and I regretted it almost immediately. But by then, the annulment papers were already sent, and I did not know how to take it back, how to explain everything without seeming foolish or overwhelming." I stepped closer to him now, close enough to see every detail of exhaustion and grief on his handsome face. "Ethan, I lost my mother too, remember? I know what it feels like to want to protect yourself from more pain, but shutting people out doesn't actually protect you. It just makes you lonely during the times you need connection the most." "I know that now," Ethan said softly. "I have thought about you every single day since you left, Mia. Not just about the wedding, or the lie we told my grandfather. About you, your laugh, the way you talked about your mother's cinnamon roll recipe, the way you made my grandfather's last weeks happier than I had seen him in years. I have missed you every day, even while convincing myself it was better to let you go." Tears filled my eyes now too, hearing him finally speak so honestly about his feelings. "Your grandfather left me a letter," I said. "He told me not to let fear keep us apart. He said he learned that lesson too late in his own life." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "He wrote you a letter?" I nodded, reaching into my bag and pulling out the folded paper, handing it to him gently. He read it slowly, his hands trembling slightly, tears finally spilling down his cheeks as he read his grandfather's final wishes and observations. "He knew," Ethan whispered, looking up at me after finishing the letter. "He knew it wasn't entirely real at first, but he saw something change between us anyway." "He did," I said softly, "and he wanted us to have a real chance, without the pressure of the original lie hanging over everything." Ethan carefully folded the letter and handed it back to me, then finally closed the distance between us completely, his hands gently cupping my face. "Mia, I don't want to let fear keep us apart either. Not anymore. I know this is complicated, and I know we started this whole thing under strange and dishonest circumstances. But what I feel for you is real, has been real since that first night in the garden. I don't want to spend one more day pretending otherwise." "What are you saying?" I asked softly, though I already knew, hoping desperately I understood him correctly. "I'm saying I don't want the annulment to be the end of our story," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the emotion still thick in it. "I know I already signed those papers, foolishly, out of fear. But I want to start over, properly this time. No lies, no arrangements, no $50,000 contracts. Just you and me, discovering if what we found that weekend can grow into something real and lasting." My heart felt like it might burst from happiness. "I would like that very much," I whispered. Ethan smiled, truly smiled, the kind of genuine happiness I had only glimpsed briefly during our wedding weekend. Then he leaned down and kissed me, softly at first, then deeper, filled with weeks of longing and finally released honesty. When we finally pulled apart, both of us slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against mine, just as he had done under the garden stars weeks earlier. "So," he said softly, a small laugh in his voice, "where do we go from here?" "I don't know," I admitted, smiling widely despite my still teary eyes. "But I would like to find out, together this time, without any pretending." "Together," Ethan agreed, echoing the word we had shared during that strange, wonderful, complicated wedding weekend that had somehow, against every reasonable expectation, brought us to this exact moment. The weeks that followed felt like learning to walk again, but in the best possible way. Ethan and I started completely over, dating properly this time, without contracts or arrangements or pretend stories to memorize. He came to the bakery almost every morning before work, sitting at the small counter with a cup of coffee and one of my cinnamon rolls, the same recipe my mother had taught me years earlier. My father grew to like him quickly, once he understood the full truth of everything that had happened. I was worried when Mia first told me about this arrangement. My father admitted to Ethan one morning, several weeks into our real relationship. A pretend marriage seemed like something that could only lead to trouble. "It nearly did," Ethan admitted honestly. "I almost let fear ruin the best thing that has happened to me in years." "Well," my father said, smiling warmly, "I'm glad you both found your way back to each other, one way or another." Ethan also insisted on visiting the bakery kitchen often, watching me work, sometimes even trying to help, though his baking skills were admittedly terrible at first. "This is much harder than it looks," he said one evening, covered in flour after failing to properly shape a loaf of bread for the third time. "You're getting better," I said, laughing at the flour dusted across his expensive shirt. "I don't think that's true," he said, laughing along with me, "but I'm enjoying myself anyway." Those simple, ordinary moments, flour-covered kitchens and shared coffee, and quiet mornings together, felt more meaningful to me than any of the grand, formal wedding celebrations we had performed for his grandfather weeks earlier. About a month into our real relationship, Ethan asked me to visit the piece of land his grandfather had left me in his will. We drove out together on a quiet Sunday afternoon, following the same road that had once led me to that strange, fateful wedding weekend. The land sat on the eastern edge of the old Cross estate, a beautiful open field bordered by tall trees, with a small stream running along one edge. It was peaceful and quiet, completely different from the busy city street where my father's bakery sat. "What are you thinking of building here?" Ethan asked, walking beside me through the tall grass. I had actually been thinking about this question for weeks, turning different ideas over in my mind. "I want to build a real bakery," I finally said. Not just a shop that sells bread and pastries, but a place where people can come learn to bake too. Classes for children, for adults, maybe even scholarships for young people who want to attend culinary school but can't afford it, like I once dreamed of doing myself. Ethan's face lit up with genuine excitement. Mia, that's a wonderful idea. I keep thinking about your dream too, I continued. The affordable housing idea you told me about that first night in the garden. What if we found a way to combine our ideas somehow? Build a community here maybe. Affordable homes surrounding a bakery and cooking school that serves the whole neighborhood. Ethan stopped walking, staring at me with an expression of surprise and deep admiration. You remembered that? About the housing? Of course I remembered, I said softly. It mattered to you. That means it matters to me too. He pulled me close, kissing me gently under the open sky. I love you, he said softly, the words slipping out naturally, easily, as if they had been waiting patiently to be spoken for weeks. My heart swelled with happiness. I love you too, I replied, meaning every single word, completely. We spent the rest of that afternoon walking through the field, sketching rough ideas in a small notebook Ethan carried, dreaming about a future neither of us could have imagined just 2 months earlier, when we were still complete strangers meeting for the first time in his glass office downtown. Over the following months, our dreams slowly began taking real shape. Ethan used his business knowledge and resources to help plan the affordable housing section, while I worked with local architects to design the bakery and cooking school building. We named the whole project Robert's Garden, in honor of the kind old man whose final wishes had brought us together, and whose generous gift had made our shared dream possible. My father eventually retired from daily bakery work, though he still visited often, teaching classes at our new cooking school, and sharing old family recipes with eager young students. Sarah joined the project too, managing the coffee shop we built inside the new bakery, finally getting to combine her barista skills with something bigger and more meaningful than her old job downtown. Diane, surprisingly, became one of my closest friends during this time, helping organize the business side of everything while also, occasionally, teasing Ethan about how nervous he had been during our very first strange business meeting all those months ago. I have never seen him so flustered, she told me one afternoon, laughing as she shared old memories. Usually Mr. Cross handles million-dollar deals without blinking an eye, but interviewing potential wives for his dying grandfather, that completely broke his calm exterior. I noticed, I said, laughing along with her, thinking back to that nervous, careful man I had first met in his glass tower office. That man felt very different now from the Ethan I knew today. Warmer, more open, more willing to share his true feelings instead of hiding behind careful business language and controlled expressions. 1 year after our strange, unexpected wedding, Ethan proposed to me again, properly this time, kneeling in the very same garden where we had shared our first real kiss under the stars. This time, there was no arrangement, no contract, no dying grandfather's wish pushing us toward marriage. Just two people who had fallen genuinely, deeply in love, choosing each other completely and honestly. Mia Bennett, Ethan said, holding a small ring in his trembling hands. Will you marry me? Really marry me this time? For real? Forever? Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, unable to speak for a moment through my overwhelming happiness. Yes, I finally managed. Yes, 1,000 times yes. We married again 6 months later, in a real ceremony filled with friends, family, and genuine love, nothing like the small, secretive wedding that had started our unlikely story. My father walked me down the aisle, tears of joy in his eyes. Sarah stood beside me as my maid of honor, and though Robert Cross could not be there in person, I felt his warm presence throughout the entire beautiful day, especially when Ethan slipped a small photograph of his grandfather into his jacket pocket, keeping him close during our most important moment. To Robert, Ethan whispered during his wedding speech, raising his glass toward the sky, thank you for believing in something real, even when we could not see it ourselves. Standing there beside my husband, surrounded by love and laughter, and the warm memory of a kind old man whose dying wish had somehow led to my own life's greatest happiness, I understood something important. Sometimes, the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful, lasting stories. I had married a stranger for 24 hours, expecting nothing more than a solution to a difficult financial problem. Instead, that stranger had changed my entire life, teaching me about courage, honesty, and the surprising, unpredictable ways that love sometimes finds us, even when we are not looking for it at all. 2 years after our first strange, unexpected wedding, Robert's Garden finally opened its doors to the public. The morning of the opening, I stood outside the new building with Ethan, both of us staring up at the sign above the door, our hands intertwined tightly. The building itself was beautiful, made of warm red brick with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Behind it stood the first section of affordable housing, 20 small but comfortable homes, already filled with families who had been carefully selected through a fair application process. Teachers, nurses, young families just starting out, all now living in homes they could actually afford, something increasingly rare in our expensive city. "Are you nervous?" Ethan asked, squeezing my hand gently. "Very," I admitted, laughing softly. "This feels bigger than our actual wedding day." "It is bigger," Ethan said with a proud smile. "This is going to change people's lives, Mia. Real people, real families, not just us." Inside, the bakery section smelled exactly like I had always dreamed it would, warm bread and sweet cinnamon filling the air. My father stood proudly behind the main counter, wearing a new apron with the Robert's Garden logo stitched carefully across the front. Sarah managed the coffee counter nearby, already chatting happily with the first curious customers who had wandered in. The cooking school section, located toward the back of the building, held 6 large teaching kitchens, already fully booked for the coming months, with classes ranging from beginner bread baking to advanced pastry techniques. We had already awarded our first 3 culinary scholarships to local students who dreamed of attending professional cooking schools but lacked the money to make it happen, much like my own younger self all those years earlier. "This is your dream," Ethan said quietly, watching me look around the busy, happy space with tears gathering in my eyes. "It's our dream," I corrected him gently. "Yours and mine, and your grandfather's too." We had placed a small photograph of Robert Cross near the entrance, along with a short plaque explaining the story behind the building's name. Many visitors stopped to read it during that first opening day, some smiling, some wiping away small tears of their own, moved by the story of a dying man's final wish, leading to something so beautiful and lasting. Later that afternoon, as the initial excitement of opening day began settling into a comfortable, busy rhythm, Ethan pulled me aside into a quiet corner near the back office. "I have something else for you," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small folded paper. I opened it carefully, recognizing immediately that it was a copy of architectural plans, though for a different building than the one we currently stood inside. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "The second location," Ethan said, his eyes bright with excitement. "I have been working with the city planning office. There's an empty lot on the east side of downtown, near the old industrial district. Lots of families there could really use something like this too." "Ethan, this is huge," I said, staring at the detailed plans in amazement. "I know," he said, smiling widely, "but I learned something important from you, Mia. Some of the best things in life start out feeling impossible, or at least incredibly complicated, but they turn into something beautiful anyway, if you're brave enough to try." I laughed, thinking back to our strange beginning, a fake marriage born from fear and financial desperation, somehow transforming into the foundation of an entire life built on genuine love, generosity, and shared purpose. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," I said softly. "Of us," Ethan corrected gently, echoing my own earlier words back to me. "He would be proud of us." That evening, after the crowds had finally left and the building grew quiet, Ethan and I sat together on the front steps of our new bakery, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, very similar to the colors that had filled the garden sky on our very first wedding day. "Can you believe it's already been 2 years?" I asked, resting my head against his shoulder. "Sometimes it feels like much longer," Ethan said thoughtfully, "like I have known you my entire life. Other times it feels like no time has passed at all, since that strange first meeting in my office." I remember being so nervous, I admitted, laughing softly at the memory. I thought you might be some kind of criminal, honestly, with that strange job posting. Ethan laughed loudly, the sound warm and genuine. I remember being terrified you would say no, and then I would have to face my grandfather with yet another disappointment. Instead, we accidentally found something real, I said softly, looking up at him with all the love I felt filling my chest. The best kind of accident, Ethan agreed, leaning down to kiss me softly as the sun continued setting behind us, marking the end of another beautiful, unexpected day in our shared, ever-growing story. 5 years passed quickly, filled with growth, laughter, and the steady rhythm of a life built on honesty instead of secrets. Robert's garden had grown far beyond that first small building near the old Cross estate. There were now 3 locations across the city, each one combining affordable housing with a community bakery and cooking school, exactly as Ethan and I had once dreamed while walking through that quiet, grassy field. Dozens of families lived comfortably because of the housing program, and over 50 young students had received culinary scholarships, several of them now working in respected restaurants across the country, living out the very dream I had once given up myself. Bennett's Bread, the original small shop that had started this entire unlikely journey, still stood on its original street corner, though my father had fully retired now, spending his days fishing and visiting his grandchildren instead of waking before dawn to bake bread. Yes, grandchildren. Ethan and I had 2 children by then, a 5-year-old daughter named Clara, named after Ethan's grandmother, and a 2-year-old son named Robert, after the kind old man whose dying wish had somehow led us to this beautiful, unexpected life together. On a warm Saturday morning, almost exactly 5 years after our first strange, secretive wedding, our small family gathered in the garden of the old Cross estate, the very same garden where Ethan and I had shared our first honest conversation under the stars. Clara ran ahead of us through the grass, chasing butterflies near the same fountain where Ethan had once told me about his hidden dream of building affordable housing. Little Robert toddled along more slowly, holding tightly to his father's hand, his chubby legs still unsteady on the uneven garden path. "Do you remember this spot?" Ethan asked, settling onto the familiar stone bench, pulling me down gently beside him, while we watched our children play nearby. "How could I forget?" I said, smiling at the memory. "This is where everything really began. Not the wedding ceremony itself, but this, right here, when we finally started being honest with each other." "I was so nervous that night," Ethan admitted, echoing feelings he had shared with me many times over the years, though the memory never seemed to lose its warmth with repetition. I had built so many walls around myself after losing my parents. I never expected a stranger, of all people, to be the one who finally broke through them. "I wasn't trying to break through anything," I said honestly. "I was just being myself." "Maybe that's exactly why it worked." Ethan smiled, kissing my temple gently. "Grandfather always said the best things happen when we stop trying so hard to control everything." "He was a wise man," I agreed softly. We sat together comfortably, watching Clara giggle as she finally caught a butterfly gently in her small hands, examining it closely before carefully letting it fly away again. Robert clapped his tiny hands with delight at his sister's discovery, his laughter ringing through the quiet garden air. "Mama, look!" Clara called out excitedly, running toward us. "I caught it and let it go, just like you said." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a warm hug as she reached us, breathless and happy from her chase through the garden. "Tell me the story again," Clara said, settling comfortably onto my lap, her favorite request whenever we visited this particular garden. "The one about how you and Daddy met." Ethan and I exchanged a warm, knowing smile. Over the years, we had developed a special, simplified version of our story for Clara, one that captured the important truths without overwhelming a young child with all the complicated details of pretend marriages and financial desperation. "Once upon a time," I began, "just as I always did, your daddy needed to make his grandfather very happy because his grandfather was very sick and did not have much time left." "That's great-grandpa Robert," Clara said knowingly, having heard this part many times before. That's right, Ethan continued the story, smiling at his daughter. So I asked Mommy to help me, even though we had just met. We pretended to be married for one whole day, just to make Great-Grandpa Robert smile. But then you fell in love for real, Clara finished happily, clapping her small hands together with delight, just as she did every single time we reached this part of the story. We did, I agreed, kissing the top of her soft curly hair, so similar to my own. We fell in love for real, right here in this very garden, under the stars. And then you got married for real too, Clara added, always eager to add her own details to our familiar tale. We did that too, Ethan agreed, reaching over to gently squeeze my hand. The best decision either of us ever made. Clara nodded seriously, satisfied with the story's happy conclusion, before hopping off my lap to chase after her little brother, who had wandered curiously toward a cluster of colorful flowers near the garden's edge. Watching our children play together in that peaceful garden, surrounded by the same flowers and fountain that had witnessed the beginning of our real relationship years earlier, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. I thought about that terrified, desperate young woman who had walked nervously into a huge glass office tower years earlier, agreeing to marry a complete stranger simply to save her family's small bakery. I thought about how frightened I had been, how uncertain, how convinced that $50,000 was the only good outcome I could possibly hope to gain from such a strange, risky arrangement. I never could have imagined, sitting in that car on my way to meet Ethan Cross for the very first time, that this stranger would eventually become my husband, my best friend, and the father of my two beautiful children. I never could have predicted that a dying man's final wish would lead not only to his own peaceful, happy final days, but also to an entire community of families finding affordable homes and a whole new generation of young bakers finding scholarships to chase their own culinary dreams. Sometimes, life's most beautiful stories begin in the most unexpected, complicated ways. A fake marriage, a desperate financial arrangement, a dying grandfather's simple wish for happiness. From such an unlikely, tangled beginning, an entire lifetime of genuine love, purpose, and joy had somehow grown, strong and lasting, like the tall oak trees lining the old estate's long driveway. "Ethan," I said softly, watching our children laugh together in the golden afternoon sunlight. "Yes?" he asked, turning to look at me with the same warm, gentle expression that had first caught my attention all those years earlier. "I'm so glad I said yes," I told him honestly, my heart full of quiet, contented happiness. To that strange job posting, to that impossible arrangement, to all of it. Ethan smiled, pulling me close against his side, resting his chin gently on top of my head as we continued watching our small family enjoy the peaceful garden together. "I'm glad you said yes, too," he whispered softly. "Best 24 hours of my entire life, Mia, even though it turned into so much more than either of us ever expected." And as the golden sun continued setting slowly behind the old stone house, casting warm light across the garden where our unlikely love story had truly begun, I knew, without any doubt at all, that I was exactly where I was always meant to be. Thank you for reading I Married a Stranger for 24 Hours. Then He Changed My Life Forever. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people or real companies is purely coincidental. I hope Mia and Ethan's journey, from a desperate arrangement to a lasting, honest love, reminded you that the best things in life often begin in the most unexpected ways.